Gospel according to St. Matthew, the 2nd chapter. Glory to you, O Lord. In the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, asking, "Where is the child who has been born King of the Jews? For we observed his star at its rising, and have come to pay him homage." When King Herod heard this, he was frightened, and all Jerusalem with him. And calling together all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. They told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it has been written by the prophet. And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod secretly called for the wise men, and learned from them the exact time when the star had appeared. Then he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child. And when you have found him, bring me word so that I may also go and pay him homage." When they had heard the king, they set out. And there ahead of them went the star that they had seen at its rising, until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw that the star had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then, opening their treasure chests, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road. You may know that this past November I had the chance to go and get inside the church in Germany where my great-great-great-grandparents were married 170 years ago. And that was a cool experience, and I had actually been to the church before, but not inside the church. But it had been a little while, so I was careful before I left to check Google Maps and figure out how to get there again. And it's really pretty easy, because there is only one road that really goes to this dinky little town where the church is. So I figured it would be really pretty simple. And it was. I left the airport, I drove down the Autobahn, I got off the one road, I drove about 2 miles down the road, and that's when I discovered that the road was under construction and closed in the direction which I was going. So I looked around. I was in this little village, and I looked around for the ubiquitous detour signs that seem to be everywhere, and I know what that looks like in Germany. There were no detour signs. You were just supposed to figure it out. So at that moment, 2 hours into my vacation, I decided that the $40 extra I had spent to make sure I had GPS in the car was worth every penny. And I started looking around on my GPS, figuring that there must be some series of little back roads and things that eventually I could wind my way around and find myself back on the road where it was open. I did, but it was not fun. I do not enjoy having to find another road, even when I'm on vacation. Because even with the GPS, finding another road was really kind of difficult and complicated. Finding that other road, which I did find, managed to delay my trip so much that it took almost twice the amount of time it should have taken to get to where I was going. And as many of you know from knowing how I react to situations like this, all of my, I'm on vacation, all that feeling was gone. I was done with that for a while. Finding another road is really something that's aggravating. It probably is for you too. I suspect that it was also for the wise men when they came to visit Jesus. Need to understand that the wise men had been on this journey for a very long time. The gospel reading says, when the star finally stopped, they were overjoyed. It was great. Finally, we're at the end of what could have been a 2-year journey, because that's how long they told King Herod it had been since the star had appeared. And they were overwhelmed with joy when they entered the house and they saw Jesus. They opened their treasure chest, they gave him the gifts, and then they thought, now we can go home. And yet right at that moment, they have a dream. And in the dream they are warned not only not to return to King Herod, they are told to go and find another road. And finding another road was neither as easy nor as romantic as our Christmas cards like to make it out to be. There were very few alternatives to going back east when you were in and around Jerusalem and Bethlehem. If you wanted to find a road, you were going to have to go through the mountains, through the deserts, in places that were dangerous. It was going to be hard and confusing to try to find that place, and basically you were going to have to pick the least bad alternative, because none of them were good. If you were going to find that other road, you were going to be in a situation that was going to take you probably twice as long as it should have to get back home. Most scholars think that if you were trying to find a way in those days from Bethlehem to go back east and not go through Jerusalem, what you would need to do is go way west and way south before you could loop around and come back. It would be at least twice the time. And I am sure that when these wise men were on that journey, on that alternative road, full of danger, full of extra length, full of places they didn't even know where they were going, that at some point all of the, we found the baby Jesus, that was probably all gone for them too. They probably were wondering, really? We have to go down this other road? Was that dream really God, or was that just us being worried a little bit because we got a bad vibe when we met with King Herod? Yet somehow these wise men decided that they really did need to go down that other road, even though they knew that the other road was going to be longer, was going to be harder, was going to be more complicated, and they were going to lose a lot of their warm, fuzzy feeling that they had just encountered in Bethlehem. They somehow knew that finding that other road was what we would call today mission critical to God's plan. And it was mission critical for them to be part of God's plan. And part of what was maybe the most mission critical thing for them was that in finding that other road and looking for that other road, they started to come to know what everybody eventually finds out if you get involved with God. And what you find out when you get involved with God is that God is always calling us to go down other roads. Roads that we hadn't considered before, roads that we hadn't envisioned, roads that we were not planning to take. And finding out that sometimes those roads really are mission critical to what God has in mind for us. That is what those wise men started to realize. And in fact, as we read through the Gospel of Matthew this year, you'll find out that that's what everybody starts to find out when they get involved with Jesus. Jesus is always calling people to different roads. May not be a physical road, but it may be a different kind of way of living with God or living with other people. Jesus starts telling people to love their enemies, pray for those who persecute them. That is a way different road than a lot of people were envisioning. But that's what God does all the time in our lives. And the roads, the new roads, the different roads, the alternate roads that God may be calling us to go down may also not be physical roads like I had to find in Germany or the wise men had to find in Bethlehem. But they may in fact be roads that are new ways of living, new ways of considering what God has in store for our future, new ways of ordering our lives, new ways of acting. And that can be really hard. Sometimes I don't want to go, I don't want to go down other roads. Often I don't want to go down other roads because they're like the New Year's resolutions that many of us have been considering or avoiding. Because a New Year's resolution really is kind of like a different road. And like any other different road, they are harder and more difficult than simply doing things the way you always did them before. This is especially the case if you have hardware or software upgrades in your New Year's resolution, which I deal with every year, and I sit there and go, this is harder. This is more difficult than just doing things the way I always did them before. Even when I realize I gotta change and I gotta grow. But sometimes those roads that cause us to have to change and grow are precisely the roads that God is calling us to travel with. Our New Year's resolutions, like lots of our roads, are roads that take a whole lot more time than just doing things and going down the roads we've always gone down before. You know, what will your schedule, what will your life look like if you really do reorder some priorities this year? If you really do rearrange your schedule? If you really try to start doing things you feel called to do and stop doing things that just aren't working for you anymore, what will the lay of the land look like? The wise men didn't know, but they went down that road anyway. Sometimes those are the roads that God is calling us to journey down. Sometimes for us too. New Year's resolutions, well, they're like those roads that are frankly not nearly as fun and exciting as when you stopped, as when you started and thought, oh, this will be cool. I mean, look at your Christmas cards that have pictures of the wise men journey. Everybody thinks, this is really fun and exciting. Out in the desert, traveling around. And if you're in the desert southwest of the United States, on trails run by the Park Service, and you got a car, and you got water, it's fun. But it wasn't so much fun for the wise men. It was harder. And they had to learn to change in ways that they hadn't prepared for. Finally, it is the case that there is no exercise program that you can be part of that is nearly as fun and exciting as what it looks like on TV in the ads. Because adaptive change and learning to do something differently is always emotionally draining, and you start to lose that feeling of, oh, this is great. But sometimes those roads are the roads that God is calling us to travel down. So no wonder going down another road is so hard. No wonder so many of us don't want to do it. But very often, those other roads that we're considering are God's call for us to live in new ways. They are God's invitation to consider different possibilities for our lives. They are God's ways of redirecting us in ways that really end up being mission critical for the future of our lives. So the Epiphany stories always ask us also to consider, what are the different roads that God is calling you to travel down in your life? What are the new ways that Jesus is calling you to think and to act and to envision your life? I think I know some of those roads in my life. I think I know some of the roads that we need to travel down as a congregation. But what I'm sure of is that in Jesus, God is always calling us to look for the other road, for a different road that God is opening up in our lives. God is always calling us to be open to new roads and to new ways of living our lives. And God is always calling us and redirecting us in new and different ways so that we can more fully live into the future that God is calling us to be a part of.